After 43 years of marriage, I honestly believed I had heard everything. But last Thursday morning, sitting across from me at our kitchen table, Margaret said something that cracked something open inside my chest, sharp and sudden, like lake ice breaking in early spring. "Robert," she said quietly, staring down at her mug instead of at me, "I think it would be best if you didn't come up to the cottage this Christmas." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. "What do you mean I shouldn't come?" I asked, lowering my coffee cup slowly onto the table. She still wouldn't look at me. "The kids think well, we all think it might be easier if you stayed home this year. You've been very difficult lately." Difficult. That word didn't just land in the room. It hovered there, thick and unpleasant, like smoke that refuses to clear. "Difficult how?" I asked. I already knew the tone she was about to use. She'd started using it about a year ago. Calm on the surface, strained underneath, like she was explaining something obvious to someone who just couldn't keep up. "At Thanksgiving, you argued with Trevor about his business idea," she said. "And at Emma's birthday, you made that comment about her boyfriend's tattoos. The kids feel like they're always walking on eggshells around you. Trevor was our son. 41 years old. Divorced. Worked in marketing. Emma was 38, our daughter, a social worker. Good kids. At least, I always thought so. I thought Margaret and I had done a decent job raising them." "I was having a conversation," I said. "Trevor asked for my opinion. You called his idea impractical." "Because it was impractical," I replied. "He wanted to quit a stable job to start a podcast about cryptocurrency." Margaret let out that familiar sigh. Deep. Heavy. The kind that carried disappointment with it. "That's exactly what I mean, Robert," she said. "You can't just be supportive. Everything has to be your judgment, your way, your opinion." I stared at her. This was the woman I'd loved since 1979. We met at the University of Toronto, married young, built a life from the ground up. 3 kids. A house in North York. Careers people respected. I worked as a civil engineer for the city for 35 years. Bridges. Infrastructure. Work nobody notices unless something fails. I was good at it. I took pride in it. "So that's it?" I asked. "After 43 years, I'm uninvited from Christmas?" "It's not forever," she said quickly. "Just this year. Everyone needs a little space." She reached across the table like she might take my hand, then hesitated and pulled back. "Maybe you could spend it with your brother," she added. My brother Paul lived in Vancouver. We talked maybe twice a year. "Right," I said. That night, I lay awake while Margaret slept beside me. The house felt too quiet. I thought about all the Christmases at the cottage, a tradition we'd started when Trevor was 5. Snow piled outside. The fireplace going. Margaret's tour tire in the oven. The kids tearing open presents. Grandkids running around in recent years. And now, just like that, I was being cut out. The next morning, Margaret had already left for her book club. There was a note on the counter. "Didn't want to wake you. Coffee's ready." I spent most of the day in my basement workshop. I'd been down there more and more lately. It was the only place that still felt like mine. The rest of the house had slowly become Margaret's territory over the years. Her decorations. Her systems. Her rules. But the basement was different. Tools everywhere. Half-finished projects. My mess. My logic. For the past 8 months, I'd been working on something down there. Something no one in my family knew about. And even if they had known, they probably wouldn't have cared. To them, I was just old Robert puttering around, killing time. But this was real. More real than anything I'd done in years. And that's where the story truly begins. The basement had always been my refuge, but over the past year, it had become something more than a hiding place. It had become proof. I sat at my workbench that afternoon, surrounded by tools and old notebooks, and thought about how easily people decide you're finished. Not because you've stopped thinking or learning, but because they've stopped listening. The house above me was quiet. Too quiet. No television, no footsteps, no familiar sounds of shared life. Just the low hum of the furnace and the soft buzz of the overhead light. For 8 months, I'd been working on something down there. Carefully. Methodically. Without telling anyone. Not because it was a secret, but because no one had asked. It all started back in March at a retirement party for a former colleague of mine, David Chen. We'd worked together years ago when I was still with the city. David left before I did, went into consulting, started working with tech startups focused on infrastructure. We were standing near the bar, nursing drinks, talking about nothing important, when he said something that made my ears perk up. Biggest problem in construction right now, he said casually, is coordination. Architects use one system, engineers another, contractors something else entirely. Everyone's speaking a different language. Half the delays and cost overruns come from that alone. I nodded because I knew exactly what he meant. ID spent decades dealing with that mess. Someone needs to build a universal platform, he continued. Something that translates between systems in real time. AI-driven maybe. Could save billions. He said it like an afterthought, then moved on to complaining about his golf swing. But I couldn't let it go. Because David didn't know what I knew. Back in the 1990s, when I was working on early infrastructure planning for the Shepherd subway line, ID built a coordination system. Nothing fancy. No code. Just standardized communication protocols between contractors so everyone stayed aligned. It worked better than anyone expected. The city used it for years. Eventually, it got buried under newer technologies and forgotten. But the principles behind it were solid. Always had been. And I'd been thinking about how to modernize it for a long time. After that party, I stopped just thinking and started working. Really working. I taught myself Python from scratch. I read about machine learning, data integration, modern construction tech. I watched lectures online. Read documentation late into the night. Margaret thought I was just wasting time on the computer. The kids joked about Grandpa learning to code. I laughed along because it was easier than explaining. But I wasn't dabbling. I was building. By November, I had a working prototype. It wasn't polished, but it functioned. I fed it old project data I still had access to and watched what happened. The results shocked even me. Coordination time dropped by more than half. Costs were cut dramatically. Errors were flagged before they turned into disasters. I showed it to David over coffee, almost casually. Remember that conversation we had? I said. You've been tinkering with something. He stared at my laptop for 5 full minutes without speaking. Then he looked up at me differently. Robert, he said slowly, do you understand what this is? A coordination platform, I said. He shook his head. No. This is industry changing. I told him I'd been working on it for about 8 months. He laughed, but it wasn't amused. It was stunned. You built this alone? The ideas were already there, I said. I just translated them. David leaned back. I know people. Investors. Venture capitalists. Can I show this to them? I shrugged. At that point, my family already thought I was obsolete. Sure, I said. Why not? 3 weeks later, I was sitting across from executives at a firm called Apex Ventures in downtown Toronto. They asked tough questions. Technical ones. Business ones. Market ones. I answered every single one. ID lived in this industry for 35 years. I knew its problems better than most people half my age. They didn't just want to invest. They wanted to buy it. The number they mentioned made my head spin. 7 figures up front, with more tied to performance. I didn't tell Margaret. I didn't tell the kids. Because how do you say that to people who've already decided you're difficult? I signed the papers quietly. The announcement was set for December 26th. Boxing Day. And Christmas, I already knew, would be spent alone. I didn't tell anyone about the deal. Not Margaret. Not Trevor. Not Emma. It wasn't secrecy for the sake of drama. It was self-preservation. When people have already decided you're out of touch, any sudden success sounds like fantasy to them. I wasn't interested in being laughed at one more time. The papers were signed. The lawyers handled the details. The announcement was scheduled for exactly 12 minutes past midnight on Boxing Day. That part was out of my hands. Christmas arrived quietly. Margaret packed her suitcase on the morning of the 23rd. She packed for two, even though I wouldn't be there. She said it was just in case. We both knew I wasn't going to change my mind. I wasn't going to show up where I'd been politely asked not to exist. She kissed my cheek before leaving, a gesture that felt automatic rather than affectionate, then pulled out of the driveway. I stood at the window until her car disappeared down the street. The house felt staged afterward. The tree was lit. The decorations were perfect. It looked like someone else's idea of Christmas, not mine. Trevor called on Christmas Eve. "Hey, Dad. Just wanted to say Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said. "You doing okay? Mom said you decided not to come." Decided. That word again. "I'm fine," I said. "Enjoy the cottage." There was a pause. Then, "Yeah. Maybe next year." Maybe. We hung up. That night, I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat in the living room with the lights dimmed. I expected anger. Bitterness. Regret. Instead, I felt calm. For the first time in months, no one was sighing when I spoke. No one was correcting my tone. No one was waiting for me to finish so they could change the subject. Christmas Day passed quietly. I worked in the basement, refining a few technical details. Around noon, I made myself a turkey sandwich with cranberry sauce because tradition still mattered to me, even if family didn't. At exactly 12 minutes past midnight, my phone rang. Trevor. His voice was tight. Higher than usual. "Dad, what the hell?" My heart skipped. "What's wrong? Is everyone okay?" "Your name is on the news," he said. "CBC just sent a notification." I sat down slowly. "It says you sold some kind of construction technology platform to Apex Ventures." He swallowed. "Dad, it says $8.5 million. I closed my eyes. "Oh," I said. Silence. "Then, is this real?" "Yes." "How?" "I built something." Another pause. "Then, I need to call you back." He hung up. My phone didn't stop ringing for the next hour. Emma. Margaret. Trevor again. Texts. Voicemails. Missed calls stacking up like debris after a storm. I didn't answer. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up to 47 text messages and a dozen voicemails. Some were from family. Others were from old colleagues who had seen the story. A few were from reporters. Margaret came home that afternoon alone. She walked into the house without knocking and stood there like she didn't recognize the place. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Tell you what?" "Don't do that," she said. "The technology. The deal. Any of it." I looked at her carefully. "Would you have been interested?" I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "That's not fair," she said. "When was the last time anyone here asked what I was working on?" I said quietly. "When was the last time anyone cared what I thought unless it was to tell me I was wrong?" She sat down heavily. "The kids feel terrible," she said. "I'm sure they do. Trevor says he had no idea." "He wouldn't have cared," I said. 8 months ago, when I told him I was learning to code, he laughed. He didn't mean yes, he did. And Emma made jokes too. "And you," I paused, "you told people at your book club I was going through a phase." She flinched. "Linda Morrison told me," I added. She thought it was cruel. Margaret started to cry. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. For not listening? Or for realizing too late? She didn't answer. We sat there in silence. Finally, she asked, "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I know the deal closes today. I know Apex wants me consulting in January." Beyond that, I shook my head. I need time. That evening, Trevor and Emma showed up together. Coordinated. Nervous. They apologized. They meant it. But I'd lived long enough to know that apologies were only the beginning. What mattered was what came next. And that part of the story was still unwritten. Trevor and Emma stood in my living room like they were waiting for a verdict. They didn't sit down at first. They hovered near the couch, hands in pockets, glancing at each other the way kids do when they know they've crossed a line but aren't sure how far. "Dad," Trevor finally said, clearing his throat. "We owe you an apology." "More than one," Emma added quickly. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to hear what they would say when they weren't interrupted or rescued by explanations. Trevor went on. "We've been treating you like you didn't matter. Like your experience was outdated. Like you were just—" He stopped, grimacing. Background noise. Emma nodded. "We thought we knew better because we were younger. Because things are different now. And we were wrong. Completely." I listened without reacting. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned that real understanding shows up in how long someone can sit with discomfort. Emma stepped forward. "What you built, Dad, it's incredible. I've been reading about it all morning. They're calling it one of the most innovative construction platforms to come out of Canada in years." "I don't care what journalists say," I replied. They both looked surprised. "What do you care about?" Trevor asked. I took a breath. "I care about being respected even when there's no headline attached to my name. I care about being listened to because I'm your father, not because I suddenly have money." They nodded. Both of them. No excuses this time. "I care," I continued, "about being part of a family where I don't have to shrink myself to make everyone else comfortable. Where my opinions aren't treated like a nuisance just because they don't fit neatly into whatever's trending." Trevor swallowed. "That's fair." "No," I said. "It's necessary." They stayed for another hour. Promises were made. Intentions stated. I didn't argue or reassure them. At 67, I knew better than to confuse words with change. After they left, the house felt quieter, but not empty. The weeks that followed were strange. The sale of the platform made national news. Business magazines called. Tech podcasts reached out. Someone from Dragon's Den even left a message asking if I'd consider appearing as a guest advisor. I declined most of it. I wasn't interested in being celebrated. I wanted to work. Apex Ventures set me up with a modest office downtown. Nothing flashy. Just a desk, a whiteboard, and a team of 12 engineers who actually wanted to hear what I thought. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Not nostalgically useful. Actively useful. I wasn't just explaining how things used to work. I was shaping how they would work next. Margaret suggested therapy in January. That surprised me. Every Thursday evening, we sat across from Dr. Kapoor, trying to untangle 4 decades of marriage. The good years. The drifting years. The years where Wed talked without really listening. "When did you start feeling unheard?" Dr. Kapoor asked me one night. I thought about it carefully. "Gradually," I said. "Maybe 10 years ago. The kids were grown. Margaret had her world. My job became routine. Somewhere along the way, everyone decided I was finished becoming." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she said. "I thought you were content." "I thought so too," I admitted. But content isn't the same as fulfilled. In February, Trevor came to me with a proposal. Not an idea scribbled on a napkin. A real plan. Had spent weeks researching how my platform could expand into client communication and project visualization. Head identified gaps. Built projections. Thought it through. My instinct was to say no. Then I remembered what ID told him. Actions matter. Show me, I said. It was good. Better than I expected. We spent 3 months working side by side. And somewhere in that process, I found the son I thought ID lost. He listened. He asked questions. He didn't interrupt or dismiss. Emma took a different path. She wanted to bring her social work background into the platform, focusing on community impact. Not profit. People. We created an advisory board. She chaired it. Margaret started taking computer classes. She said she wanted to understand what I'd been doing in the basement all those months. More importantly, she started asking questions again. Real ones. By the time the next Christmas came around, things weren't perfect. But they were honest. And that mattered more. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, I wasn't the same man who had been asked to stay home a year earlier. Not because of the money. Not because my name had appeared in headlines. But because something inside me had shifted for good. We went back to the cottage together. All of us. The lake was frozen solid, the snow thick enough to mute every sound. The place looked exactly the same as it always had, and yet it felt different, like a house that had finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. Emma brought her boyfriend, the one with the tattoos ID once made a careless remark about. Turns out he was a paramedic. Calm, grounded, the kind of man you trust without needing to ask why. He helped me shovel the driveway without saying much, and I respected that. Trevor brought his new girlfriend too, an architect. She asked thoughtful questions about my platform, about coordination failures she'd seen firsthand on job sites. Not flattery. Curiosity. That mattered. On Christmas Eve, after dinner, Trevor asked if I'd step outside with him. We stood on the deck overlooking the frozen lake, our breath visible in the cold air. Dad, he said, staring straight ahead, I need to tell you something. All right. Last year when Mom said you shouldn't come, I was relieved. I didn't interrupt him. I thought it would be easier without you. Less tension. Fewer arguments. He swallowed hard. It was the worst Christmas of my life. He turned to me then, eyes wet. It wasn't just that you weren't there. It was that we made you not be there. And the whole time, I kept thinking about every moment ID brushed you off, every time ID treated your advice like noise instead of care. He paused, collecting himself. The platform changed my career. Changed my future. But that's not why I'm sorry. I'm sorry because even if you'd never built anything again, you still deserved better. I pulled him into a hug. He cried against my shoulder the way he hadn't since he was a boy. I forgive you, I said. And I'm proud of you for facing it. After he calmed down, he asked quietly, are you happy now, Dad? I thought about it. About the work. The recognition. The repaired conversations. The quiet mornings where no one treated me like a problem to manage. I'm not invisible anymore, I said. That's what makes me happy. Through the cottage window, I could see Margaret laughing with Emma, wine glasses catching the glow of the tree lights. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. Later that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fireplace with my laptop open. I was sketching ideas for a new project, something focused on predictive infrastructure maintenance. Early thoughts. Nothing final. This time, I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't rushing to explain myself. ID learned something important over the past year. I didn't need permission to keep growing. I didn't need applause to know my work mattered. At 67, I wasn't winding down. I was still building. My phone buzzed. A message from David Chen. Saw the quarterly numbers. Your platform's exceeding projections. You've built something special. Merry Christmas. I smiled and set the phone aside. The fire crackled softly. Snow drifted past the windows. Upstairs, my family slept together, imperfect, still healing, but present. And as I closed my laptop and headed to bed, I understood this clearly. The real victory wasn't the money. It wasn't the recognition. It wasn't even the reconciliation. It was finally believing deep down that I had always been worth listening to.